So we have a number of such studies in humans now. The best one that has been done by Nancy Andreasen. Who's Nancy Andreasen? She's the former editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Psychiatry, so mainstream American psychiatry. She wrote a book called The Broken Brain in the mid-1980s. So she's very much a believer in this is a biological problem, there's a disease process. So in the early 1990s, she hypothesizes that schizophrenia is a neurodegenerative disease characterized by brain volume loss over time. And unfortunately, these drugs don't stop that neurodegenerative disease process, this brain shrinkage. So she reports in 2003 that's what she's seeing. And this is a large study, by the way. It's 500 patients, something like that. Anyway, in 2003, she reports, yep, they're losing brain volume over time, the schizophrenia patients. And it's fairly pronounced. I think it was like 1% per year, something like that. But she's saying this is a disease process, okay? She's not saying it's due to the drug. She's saying, I've identified a disease process, a lot in the frontal lobes. So her next question is this. As this shrinkage happens, what happens to the symptoms? And she finds that as you get this brain shrinkage, you get increased negative symptoms. That's the emotional disengagement. And you get some increased functional impairment. And after 5 years, some cognitive decline. So what she's doing here is a disease process, okay? Person gets diagnosed, the brain volumes decline over time, and as that happens, you get these worsening symptoms. And at one point she says, unfortunately, the drugs don't arrest this process. But she has a problem, right? Because of the monkey studies. Is it the drug or the disease or both? So she looked at that. And here's what she found, much to her dismay. And she's actually been sort of backing away from this finding, but she got a lot of heat for this finding, as you might imagine. Believe it or not, the former editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Psychiatry had trouble publishing this finding. But you'll see, all the different types of antipsychotics, in fact, were associated with smaller brain tissue volumes, decreases in both white and gray matter. And look at the last. She's now trying to account for severity of illness and whether they're using other drugs. Those don't show up as a correlating factor. So what's she really seeing? She's seeing at the very, now maybe there's a disease process, but at the very least the drugs are exacerbating this shrinkage process. This, I almost couldn't believe that she said, but you'll see it. What do these drugs do? They block basal ganglia activity, that's blocking those dopamine receptors. Prefrontal cortex gets shut down, causes the prefrontal cortex to slowly atrophy. But now put all this together. You see why this is so worrisome? Outside agent comes in, causes an observable morphological change, the diminishment of brain volumes. And as you get that diminishment of brain volumes, you're getting increased negative symptoms, that's that emotional disengagement, increased functional impairment, and cognitive impairment as well. If you had a disease model, imagine the drug as a bacteria or a virus. You'd see that as a disease process, right? So you can see why this is so concerning. Some people will say this is controversial. So there's a recent study by Spain researchers. You look at first episode psychosis, you'll see that there's a correlation with greater loss of gray matter with amount of medication. And finally, there's a study done by Joanne Moncrief and Jonathan Leo, where they managed to find 3 longer-term MRI studies of people with schizophrenia who never were exposed to antipsychotics. Now, where you find a group of patients today not exposed to antipsychotics long-term, I don't know. But in those 3 studies, there was no significant difference in brain volumes. So, which raises the possibility this shrinkage is entirely due to drug. I really don't know, okay? Because maybe there's some sign that maybe it happens even before you're medicated. I don't know. But I think the evidence that it shrinks the brains, in fact, is pretty solid when you add up the monkey studies with this other research.